Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. As always, my name is James. Thank you for tuning in. We gotta dive deep in a little bit. We're gonna touch bases a little bit about tactics, just a little bit. We don't do tactics on this channel, but regardless, we have some stuff to talk about that I think you guys will find fascinating. But before you forget, hit that like, hit that subscribe, so you don't miss out. What? All right, guys. So today we're talking about. I don't really dive into tactics, but we kind of have to skim the surface on tactics a little bit so that you guys can kind of understand what we're going through today. But regardless, man, really interesting topic, so you guys don't want to miss out. Now, today we're talking about noise distraction devices, flashbangs, whatever you want to call it. I have grown familiar with the term noise distraction device. It is what it is, guys. It doesn't sound as aggressive as a flashbang, but regardless, there's a lot of reasons to use something like that, but first we're going to talk about the thought process. The human reactionary gap is about 1.7 seconds or so. They typically will say 2 seconds, but it's actually just shy of 2 seconds, about 1.7 seconds. The reactionary gap, or the reaction, your reactionary time kind of changes depending on how prepared you are, depends on how much you train. There's a lot of variables in play, but regardless, it's about 1.7 seconds. Now, when in a tactical world, when things happen, law enforcement or military will do something to give themselves a tactical edge, so to speak. And ultimately, what you want to do, that reactionary gap, you want to reset people's reactionary thought process. And what I'm getting at is there is a thing called the OODA loop, and it's basically O.O.D.A. OODA loop. It stands for Absorb, Orient, Decide, and Act. And it was developed by United States Air Force Colonel John Boyd. And basically what it takes you through the thought process. When you observe something, you observe it, you orient yourself to it, you decide what you're going to do, and then you act on it. And so that's the thought process. That's that 1.7 seconds for you to get from the beginning to the end before you act on what you're going to do. Now, what I will say is this, is that in a tactical world, we're going to kind of angle it more in a home defense type deal, because I don't really talk tactics too much in this channel. If y'all want to do that, we can do a tactic. We could do an episode based on tactics alone involving this thing. But regardless, y'all comment if that's what y'all want. But right now, we're just talking about in a self-defense type scenario. When you're trying to, if you want to give yourself an advantage, typically what you want to do is reset someone else's OODA loop by having some type of distraction device happen so that they're going, what in the world is that, while you're taking an advantage of their delay. And ultimately, a lot of times that happens in a flashbang. Now, the problem with flashbangs themselves in the law enforcement military world is, now granted, they are huge. They work tremendously well. They have pyrotechnics involved. There's a lot of percussion. Just like in a rifle, there's a lot of energy that goes out the sides. In a flashbang, there's a lot of energy there. But there's the dangers of catching fires. There's dangers of burning people. So when it's deployed, there's a process you have to do to deploy it to make sure that it's safe to do so, because you don't want to injure a child. You don't want to injure the innocent. So again, there's a process. The thing about this is this product was sent to me that is a very valuable product that doesn't have the same, it does have a lot of the good characteristics as far as noise and distraction, without the pyrotechnics, without the danger of really seriously injuring another person, especially an innocent child or something like that. This right here is a tactical flashbang sent to me by Next Torch. Now, granted, it does have several different settings, which we'll get into those settings here in a minute. But ultimately, what you do is it has the same basic shape and characteristics of a flashbang. However, what I will say is it is completely cylindrical. There are no flat surfaces, so it can have a tendency to roll. The pros and cons of that is, if it does roll, there's still no danger. There's no pyrotechnics coming out. So as far as starting a fire, isn't the same as it would be in a regular flashbang. However, that being said, the fact that it still has the ability to roll, you really do need to know where you're deploying it, so that if you want it to stay somewhat in a certain area, you do need to drop it and try to drop it straight down. Try not to push it or kind of angle it some way to where it might have a tendency to roll. Unless rolling is what you needed to do, Again, it's not going to catch fire. The problem is you don't want it to go underneath something, couch or whatever, because it could muffle the sound and muffle the actual light, which we're going to get into now. Basically, what this thing does is it emits a siren up to about, I shouldn't say up to, it emits a siren at roughly 130 decibels, which is really close to the same thing as a gunshot. Now, the siren is more along lines of I wouldn't say a car alarm, I would say more of like a house alarm. And then if you see all the LED lights around this thing, it emits 11,000 lumens of light, and this thing is blinding, as you guys can see here. Now, it does, in general, it does work the same. You have a pin, you do have a ring, you pull it, and typically what they do teach to keep this part right here in the web of your hand so it's nice and secure, and then when you drop it, this thing comes off, and then you have the sound. Now, what we are going to do is I'm going to show you that this thing is really, really safe by holding it in my hand. I'm going to put the pin back in really quick. We're going to get some ear protection because it is really, really loud. I'm going to show you that it's really safe. It did take a minute to do this because when you're used to a real flashbang, there's some PTSD of like, you're not supposed to hold it. But this one here, you can hold it. It is safe to do so. Here you go. It's bright, so watch your eyes. And in case if you are epileptic, just be careful. There's a lot of strobing, bright lights, so you might want to look away if that is you. Okay. So the guys, I know the camera always has a tendency to lower the sound down, so you guys won't get the full effect of the sound, but it is very, very loud, and it is very, very bright. The first time I did it, I just stared at it for some reason, and I saw this like a green object, and everywhere I looked, I had to give it a couple minutes, and it did go away. But regardless, ultimately on something like this would be useful in the process of if you come home and your door's kicked open, and if they hear you coming and you want to like make entry on your own, I would say call law enforcement. But if you don't want to do that, if you want to go in and protect your own property, something like this would be something to elicit a response of like someone maybe either fleeing or like reacting to it to give you an advantage to make entry and to get a little bit of a tactical advantage, if you will, in your own house, depending on the situation. Again, I would say in a self-defense mode, I would always reference to call law enforcement, but regardless, something like this could help give you a little bit of an advantage, depending on the situation. It could give you a little bit of an advantage to cause a distraction going into the house so that you could get yourself in a position to be better prepared. We'll use that term. How about that? So let's talk a little bit about the modes on this thing. It does have, first off, we'll talk about the delay. Right now, I have it on a 1 second delay. You have it to where it's a half second, 1 second, inch and a half, 1.5 second delay, or a 3 second delay. And basically what that means, once you pull the pin, once you drop it, this goes off, or this comes off, and then that delay at that point is when it goes off. Now, when you talk about the other modes, there's 4 modes. One mode is basically there's one siren, one light flash, and in that mode you have about 4,400 uses before you have to recharge it. Now, mode 2 is, which I have it on right now, there's 2 sets of sirens, flashes, and then it turns off. That usage, you have about 300 usages before you have to recharge it, which I find phenomenal. Mode 3, you have 9 sets of sirens and flashes, which is crazy. In the tactical world, it'd be a 9-banger. And then with that one there, you only have about, man, there's a lot to go on here, guys, so I apologize. And when it goes off 9, on the 9-banger setting, you have about 80 activations before you need to recharge it, which to me is crazy. And then the 4th mode, it will do a continuous light and siren for about 12 seconds, which in that mode in of itself, you have 65 activations before you have to recharge it, which to me, that is just crazy. Now, in a combination of siren at 130 decibels along with 11,000 lumens of light, it is very disorienting. And when you deploy something like that, you're going to get, there's three reactions, right? There's fight, flight, or freeze. The biggest thing about it is regardless whatever happens, they're going to have to process that, and it's going to take them about a 1.7 to 2 second reaction time. And then typically you have to, once you deploy, you have to be ready to react at that point in time. But regardless, something like this, a distraction device like this that can be disorienting, more than likely, more times than none, people are going to get out of there simply because people don't want the smoke, regardless of how much they talk about. But regardless, when you deploy a device like this, it can give you a tactical advantage. I say advantage, when you're at a disadvantage, it can help even the playing field, or maybe even give you a more of an advantage. I would say is if you're in bed at night, something like this would be really nice to stick next to your bed. You're in bed at night, you hear something, you could deploy this thing before and then see if you elicit a response. You can deploy this thing, you can then make your tactical move, whatever that may be. And but I would always say make sure you observe everything before you do anything, okay? Don't just go shooting or whatever, guys, okay? What I will say is this thing does need to be used responsibly. It doesn't need to be used in any criminal activity. This thing is meant for a good use. And in a home defense, I could see it being used as a home defense. I have seen where people have broken into houses and have done despicable things to people. And something like this could help give you an advantage when, if you hear something in the other room, you could deploy something like this and give yourself a little bit of a tactical advantage in that aspect, guys. That's what something like this is for, and I am tickled pink about it. I am still running some tests on it. I have been pleased so far. Now, one thing I am going to say is when I got it, it was in a sleep mode, so to speak, or you would say it was in a mode, basically a sleep mode, so I guess it couldn't go off accidentally because I was deploying it. It wasn't working. Ultimately, it comes with 2 extra of these, along with 2 sets of pins. What you do is you do take the pin, the extra pin they give you, which stand by. You take the pin they give you. There's one here that's curved in 90 degrees, not that one. You take the straight one. There are 2 holes right here. It only fits in one hole. You push in that hole, you're going to see a red light. Red light means it's asleep, and then when it flashes blue, that means it's active. And then vice versa, if you want to deactivate it, keep it in sleep mode, whatever, take this, push in that hole, hold it. When it turns red, when it flashes red, therefore it's going to be asleep, and therefore when you pull the pin, it will not work. Now, granted, is this thing safe for kids? Well, here's what I will say. It is still 130 decibels. That is still a very loud siren. So I would say it's not necessarily something kids should be playing with. I would say be very, very careful when it comes around actually deploying it. But in the long run, there's not going to be any burns. There's not going to be anything like that. There's just going to be a loud siren and some bright lights. That's what the point of it is. It is a tactical distraction device. It could be used for training for law enforcement. It could be used for self-defense, or even if you're in a position that you could use it tactically, then it is something I think that is very, very well useful. That is a safer version of an actual flashbang that has a pyrotechnic and other stuff involved. Regardless, I think it is a really cool tool. nixtorch.com. Go check them out, guys. They have flashlights. They have all kinds of cool stuff. I am tickled pink about this product here. Regardless, as you guys can see, it is very bright and it is very loud. I know the microphone here doesn't do it justice, but trust me, I put AirPro in for a reason. I do love you guys. I will see y'all later.